I always thought that I would probably end up somewhere like Japan or Korea that was, in my mind at the time in college, like more posh or, just urban, posh kind of place. And I had this vision of myself, almost like this woman with my briefcase, because that was, briefcases were a thing back then, and my high heels, like walking on the subway in Tokyo. And then that vision changed to me riding a scooter and wearing salwar kameez and chappal. And it was even more challenging and more beautiful than I could have ever imagined.
Hello, and welcome to the nriwoman podcast, the space where we bring you stories that resonate with the vibrant and diverse experiences of women of Indian origin living across the world. I'm Lenora, and alongside me is my wonderful co-host, Bettina. And together, we're the voices behind nriwoman. We started this podcast to connect with and celebrate the amazing experiences of global Indian women.
Joining us today is Jessica Kumar, an American doing life in India. She's lived in India on and off for about 16 years. Jessica is the host of the super interesting podcast Invisible India, which sheds light on the lesser known aspects of Indian culture. She's also the founder of LearnHindiAnywhere.com, which, as the name suggests, is a space to learn Hindi. And she's someone who we aspire to be someday, as a content creator who creates not just to create, but also to create an impact. So welcome to the show, Jessica. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Bettina and Laura. That's so sweet. I have been a fan of your work for a while, as in following nriwoman, and I'm really glad to have the chance to be on your show, even though I am not a woman of Indian origin. But I have had a lot of experiences alongside women of Indian origin across the world, and have had lots of experiences with Indian women in India. So I'm happy to just share my perspectives and learn more about you as well.
Thank you. So, Jessica, let's just start at the very beginning about your decision to come to India. So, what was it? Was it like an easy one, a difficult one, a logical one, or just one that said, listen, let's just go with the flow and see what happens?
I think it was a difficult decision, but it was a lot of decisions made, a lot of small decisions that led me to that point. So I studied economics and marketing in the US. And after, in the early 2000s, it was all India, China, India, China. It was the whole conversation in business school. My father's an international business person, but then I ended up getting an internship in India pretty much right after my graduation. And at that point, I was able to work and live in India and learn fluent Hindi. And it was an experience I never thought that I would ever have. I always thought that I would probably end up somewhere like Japan or Korea that was, in my mind at the time in college, like more posh or, just urban, posh kind of place. And I had this vision of myself, almost like this woman with my briefcase, because that was, briefcases were a thing back then, and my high heels, like walking on the subway in Tokyo. And then that vision changed to me riding a scooter and wearing salwar kameez and chappal. And it was even more challenging and more beautiful than I could have ever imagined.
Living in a different country often means embracing new customs and traditions, right? So what aspect of the Indian culture have you found most enriching or challenging to integrate into your life?
Well, there's so many unspoken rules about communication. And I would say that it's not necessarily a custom, it's more of a cultural nuance that has been the most challenging for me, but is absolutely necessary, I think, to communicate with Indians, is understanding indirect communication. And being, even for an American, I'm a little bit more on the direct side of things. And so for me, I had to really tone it down. Not tone it down, actually. That's not the way to put it. redirect my communication in a very different way. And I still fail at this every single day. But I think people are gracious enough, and I've had some successes and I've had lots of failures in being too direct or I think even understanding Hindi and knowing the ways to say like हाँ ठीक है कल हो जाएगा or कोई बात नहीं, just being more flexible about things. There's a good amount of language which helps support that mentality of being more indirect, like हाँ ठीक है कल आऊंगी, or yeah, I'll come tomorrow, and you're never gonna come, or हाँ ठीक है मैं कोशिश करूंगी आने का, like I'll try to come, but that means no. And those are the way that you actually speak those things. But in America, especially, no is no and yes is yes, and there's not much room for interpretation. And I love the way that this wonderful guy, Craig Storty, who I interviewed on my podcast, he's an author and worked in corporate businesses in India and in the US, and he's written several books. But one thing he said is, for an American, don't put anything between the lines because they will never read it. Like, don't try to speak between the lines because they won't see it and there'll be nothing there. They will ignore it. And so making the a long answer longer, direct communication has been immensely challenging.
But I have a quick question for you as well. Does it shock people when you start to speak Hindi?
A lot of times, most of the time, yes. Most of the time, yeah, ma'am, how did you? It's just I'm just trying to buy my vegetables, and that's why I try to go to the same places a lot of time, is so I can just kind of get past that. I don't try to mix it up. Like my husband loves to go to different markets and try to negotiate this thing, just like a better deal. I'm like, I found a guy that gives me a decent price, and they don't gawk at me, and they don't bother me, and they don't ask me 50,000 questions. And there's a parking spot, I'm going there. If I had to pay 10 rupees more, I'm going to go there. But when I initially meet people, a lot of times like, oh, madam, kaise Hindi kaise si gaye? The funniest one was, some funny thing that, I've heard a lot of funny things, but one funny thing that I heard recently was, madam, आपको देख के मुझे लगा कि आप फॉरेनर थी, लेकिन जब आप बात करने लगे तो फिर मुझे मालूम चला कि आप बिहार की हो. Like, madam, I thought when I first saw you, but now that I've talked to you, I realize that you're Indian. I was like, foreigner, and he's like, and I think some people they think it's a game to pretend oh, I'm going to pretend to be Indian. I'm like, no, I'm never going to do that. Okay.
Jessica, you said in your head when you came to India to do your internship, that first stage, whereas you thought you were going to go to Japan or Korea, when did that switch happen for you to decide then that, yes, okay, I've come here? Obviously, when you came to India the first time, you must have been a lot younger and didn't come with the intention of, oh, this is where I'm going to, settle down and make my home and get married and have children or build my life.
Right.
So when did that happen? That realization, okay, this is where I want to be.
I think within the first year or two, I realized that, yeah, this India is going to be a part of my life. I felt very, and I had been to other countries before, but not not for more than, several months at a time. And I had done language learning in Peru, previously and had some really great experiences, but it was nothing like what I felt in India. And people always ask, oh, why? And it's like, I think it was just kind of a divine connection. And I felt very much like I just kind of knew that India is going to be a part of my life kind of for the long term. And so even when I was thinking about getting married, one of the, girls make a list of things that they looking for. And I made a list, obviously I wanted not just likes India, but some very intentional things about the way that this person would need to understand the world, the way that this person would need to engage with the possibility of living in India. And then I talked to a couple of Indian guys, just casually, that were, we had mutual interest in, these guys don't have this kind of understanding from my Western culture, but I don't mean to sound rude to people who are wanting to immigrate to America, but sometimes people just kind of get this lust of like, oh, I'm going to move to America. I'm going to move to America. I'm going to, I'm going to leave India and I'm going to move and I'm going to make so much money and I'm going to मैं कुछ बनूंगा, whatever. Like, I really was very clear. I was not interested in any guy that was like that. Like, oh, I'm idolizing America, and I was more interested in somebody that was kind of more balanced view, and it was like of themselves, of their identity, of uh themselves as an Indian. If the guy wasn't Indian, but if you were, I just was like looking for kind of person, and I did not find him for a while, and that was fine with me. And then I found Abhishek, who wonderful Bihari guy doing his studies in the U.S. And this was after my internship, and I had gone to the U.S. and someone had introduced us through a volunteer work opportunity. And he always gets annoyed when I tell all these nice things about him. He's like, why do you have to say all that stuff? Like, well, because it's true. It's still true, And I think it makes a point, too, that, like, being rooted in your identity and not getting so caught up in the process of what you're going to become and how you're going to impress your relatives and all of these things that many people try to do upon moving to the West. He had kind of evolved past that a bit. But he wasn't just like, I don't care, what my family thinks. I'm not like all those other Indians that just care about their family all the time, and I'm going to be my own man. He didn't have that kind of independence just for the sake of being, like a rogue. So, anyhow, we liked each other right away, and I felt that he had the intention, and he's like, I'm an only son. I will probably, my parents are a big part of my life and they're going to be my responsibility. And I had seen what it meant to become a daughter-in-law because I had lived in India for several years, and I had seen my friends go through that transformation in a traditional sense. And so I knew that there was what some of the expectations would be of getting married, being a daughter-in-law, caring for the parents, caring for the family. And it wasn't a surprise that those were important things to him, and that that would be a shared responsibility of us as a couple. So all of that I couldn't have unpacked in the first year of moving to India, but just the observations that I had made and slowly realizing that would become a huge part of my life was many small decisions.
As someone who has immersed themselves in Indian culture, like what insights or perspectives have you gained about our country and its people that you might not have otherwise discovered anywhere else?
Big question, and I think my whole life is kind of dedicated to this purpose. It's not the only thing I'm focused on, but it is something that I'm constantly learning new things. So I think that's one of the reasons I started my podcast, Invisible India, was to show the lesser known things that I was learning as a foreigner, as an American in India, and many Indians abroad also were able to relate to some of the things that I was saying. Like, I never observed that before until I left and then came back, or when I visit, I've noticed these things, or even just Indians who had foreign friends outside. Oh man, this is such a thing I observed about us. That's very different. So I can't even really encapsulate one thing because I've on like episode number 86 now, of just my things of 30-minute episodes of different topics, and I think my whole life is just going to be learning new things and observing new things. And I try to articulate those things through some of the media that I put out on my Instagram or on my podcast. And there's a lot of things which I don't share because either they're not fully processed or maybe they're not helpful for a larger audience. But it's been a very meaningful experience for me to be having a large part of my life here. It's not quite been half my life yet, but it will be soon. I think about 2 more years. I think it'll be about, I calculate that. It'll be about half my life. has been in India, and raising my children here has been an absolute privilege, and there's always something new to learn and always something new to gain.
So, where did your interest or inclination to really learn Hindi, and not just learn, but learn it to the extent where you are now in a position to teach others? I don't think we're ready. I mean, definitely, I'm not in a position to teach anybody Hindi for sure. But you find yourself in that place. So, how did that come about?
Sure. Well, I'll answer your second question first. So I'm at the point where I do teach Hindi, but I also coach. So the difference, like in my mind, is coaching is helping someone to develop skills around a topic or around a specific, set of desired growth and skills. And so I often encourage people to work with, I always encourage people, in fact, to work with native Hindi speakers. And so I serve kind of as a guide or as someone like, I've been there, I started at zero. And so these are the resources I recommend. This is where I see that you can improve. And a native Hindi speaker might be too polite to say, your pronunciation sucks, but I will be gently encouraging them, like, the pronunciation needs work, this needs work, that needs work. And I can only hear those things because I went through that process myself, and also coached and observed many, many people, and heard what Indians will say behind someone's back too, of like, oh, like, your Hindi's like this, and sure, like, people always compare foreigners to each other, or anyone really to each other. And so you can hear those things and observe, like, okay, so that person's perceived like this because of that, and this and this, because their language is like this and this and this. So I think that I feel that, I'm not an expert in like what you would learn in an Indian school. That's not what I teach. It's more of like spoken Hindi. So I'm going to start with survival Hindi of Bhaiya ye kitne ka hai? थोड़ा कम कीजिए. All of these necessary, washroom kahan hai? These things which people will actually need to know right away. Khana acha hai, bus. These simple things, which you never think to teach somebody, but they're really important when you first are beginning. So I kind of rearranged the way that you would learn in a typical learning environment, and also plug in native speakers to help students. And so that's kind of my program.
True. So, one of the interesting things is that you touched upon earlier was, there is, when you were looking for a partner, to have somebody who didn't have that lust for America. And I think just as a community, we are, there's this fantasy. I mean, I think it's not just for Indians, but for a lot of people outside of America, really to make, to live the American dream and make your life out there, have this fantastic house and all those kinds of things. So while as a community, one can understand, wanting to go there to build a better life, there is just zero understanding of why someone from there would want to come to India and build a life here, never mind marry one, have children, and then choose to raise them in India. So do you want to shed some light on, is it really that different from building a life with somebody, say, you had met in America, or does it not make a difference at all?
You both are asking such great questions, Notorious, I feel like, this is the good stuff. Yeah, there have been huge cultural differences. And even though we both live in each other's country, and we both, like, I still make cultural mistakes every single day. And he has to remind himself that, I didn't marry an Indian lady. Even though, we live here, we have a life here. There are great things about being married to an American, but there are also like a lot of challenges to be cross-culturally married for him and for me. It's not, I think people have this fantasy when they see me on Instagram that, I get the messages all the time, oh, find me an American wife. I'm like, no, that's not the point. Because if your life is already kind of in this cross-cultural, what we call, transnational family. Like Abhishek's sister lives in Canada. Already she was in Canada, half his family was in America, and some of his family was in India. He already had these experiences of having the family kind of spread out and having a family in the West and people who had integrated there. And so it wasn't like he was the first person to ever go to America. It wasn't, he'd had these experiences which made him rooted to the US besides just me. But in that sense, he's also very, very, very Indian. So I think that people have this idea also of a cross-cultural marriage, like, oh, we just take the best of both worlds and, mix them together. It's like, yeah, but you can also a lot of times get the worst of both worlds, and you gotta work hard to push those things back. And I think you have to realize that it comes with both, and you have to focus and intentionally try to build those positive aspects and really work for the best in yourself, and encouraging the other person also do that. Yeah, we've had so many. I was just talking with someone today. I think raising children has been just one of the biggest differences for us. And I think I'm not saying anything he doesn't know about, but yet raising children, because as they continuously go through different phases, you realize you have different expectations of what that kid should do or how to do things. And you have to re-navigate them every phase. Every time the kid grows and changes, and that it's not a one-all thing. Like, we agree on these parenting premises, and we're going to just follow these the rest of our life. Good luck. So everyone in marriage has those things where they have to have different expectations and all that. And I think for us, it's just more stark differences that we have to discuss. And sometimes we don't agree, and sometimes they're like, Papa and I have different views about this topic. We don't agree on this topic. So, answered your question, but there have been many big differences. And as we go along in life, neither one of our culture just automatically wins. We are always kind of creating this third space. And it might have a very Indian structure, it might have a very American structure, it might have a completely made up structure that we've created for ourselves.
What advice do you have, Jessica, for what advice do you give others that are contemplating and undergoing such a similar journey of cultural adaptation and integration? Like, what lessons have you learned along the way that you would like to pass on to the others that are in similar situations?
I think everyone's journey can be a little different. Like, my case is a little extreme. But I see that, some people don't want necessarily to bring Indian culture into their life. I know many people who move to the West and they're like, I left that all behind and I'm kind of American now. Like, okay, as long as you don't have an identity crisis in a couple years, and okay, cool, that's fine. So just saying you don't have to, you're not good enough because you don't do this or you don't do that, or your kids don't speak Hindi, or your kids don't eat butter chicken, or your kids don't, I think that having that, kind of constantly, knowing that voice that's always like, you're never Indian enough. I don't know where this comes from. I think it's just a societal thing, because I even feel that Indians feel this, like, you're never good enough. You're never sanskari enough. You're never this, look at those people's kids are so good in Indian classical dance and in music, and look at how nice they wear those clothes, and my kids are just on YouTube all day, or my kids are, even in India this is happening. So this comparison game. And so I would say let's not get caught in that, because we'll never be able to be enough for anyone. And so I think that saying these are the things I want to learn because I genuinely want to learn them, not because they're being forced upon me, I think that's a big deal.
Yeah. Do you plan to see yourself living there for the rest of your life with your family?
It's hard to say the rest of my life or not, but for the foreseeable future, I think I would hope and pray that my kids can have a stable education here and be here for some time. And my in-laws, are here, and they're older, and so we don't plan to move them around. So yeah, we're planning to be here for a long time. I don't know about, I can think about 10 to 15 but I can't think about like 30. That's a little too far for me. But yes, I plan to be here long term. Anything else to cover? Yeah, I would just say that I'm with the Learn Hindi Anywhere business that I started. I really hope that this can just be a catalyst for something else. And I'm working on new things all the time and trying to create different like segments of, this is a travelers section. This is a family, like let's learn like family content. How can I create different courses that are more topical? So that's what I have going on. And I'm always thinking of new things to do. And I appreciate you asking me about that part of my world. And then just again, thank you both so much for having me. I appreciate you having me and non-Desi on the show, the NRI women.
Yeah.
We want to thank you, Jessica, for agreeing to come onto our show. We've been following your journey into podcasting and everything else that you've been doing. And we really did mean it that, we want to be like you, who doesn't just create, but creates to create an impact. Because what you do not only sort of changes people's perspective, but also encourages them to, not just walk the narrow path, broaden their horizons a little bit. And everything that you do with a grace and humility and empathy for your listeners and audience, which I think is the most important thing for any creator. So thank you so much for coming on to our show. I'm Bettina.
And I'm Manora. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you'll join us again for our episode next week. We can be found at www or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Just look for NRI Woman. If you or someone you know has a story to share, please get in touch with us at hello@nriwoman.com or tweet us at NRI_woman. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at NRI Woman Podcast. Please help us spread the stories of these amazing women like Jessica by sharing it with your friends and family. You can find the details to connect with these guests in our show notes, NRI Woman. NRI Woman episodes come out every Thursday, so make sure you subscribe. Until next time, keep learning, keep inspiring, and always be kind.